The idea was simple, a weekend getaway to disconnect from routine and recharge. After weeks of browsing options on Airbnb, I found the perfect place. A rustic cabin in the middle of a forest, surrounded by a creek and miles of untouched nature. The photos showed a cozy environment with a central fireplace and large windows letting in natural light, creating a peaceful and warm atmosphere. The reviews highlighted the tranquility of the place, with many mentioning how it was ideal for escaping the stress of everyday life. It seemed like a dream retreat, and without hesitation, I booked it for the next weekend. When Friday came, the weather forecast predicted rain, but that didn't bother me. A bit of rain seemed to fit the cabin's vibe. I couldn't wait to get there and enjoy the solitude. After hours of driving down winding, dimly lit roads, I finally saw the cabin. It was even more isolated than I had imagined. The small wooden building seemed hidden by dense vegetation, and the sound of the nearby creek blended with the distant calls of nocturnal birds. I got out of the car, and as soon as I closed the door, I felt the overwhelming silence of the forest. There were no signs of human life around, just nature. The key was exactly where the host had indicated, under a small pot on the porch. As soon as I stepped inside, the first impression was comforting. The interior was just as cozy as the photos. The fireplace had firewood ready to light, the furniture was rustic yet comfortable, and there was a subtle scent of aged wood. However, as I explored the cabin, something unsettled me. In one of the rooms, the curtains were drawn, and when I tried to open them, I realized they were stuck. It was as if someone had deliberately kept them closed. A chill ran down my spine, but I forced myself to ignore it. It was just the tension of being in a new place, I thought. I lit the fireplace, made something to eat, and settled on the couch, trying to shake off the discomfort that lingered in the air. As the night progressed, the forest around the cabin seemed to come alive. The sound of the wind rustling the trees and the occasional creaking of the wood inside the house created an eerie atmosphere. I convinced myself it was just my imagination being influenced by the isolation. Around 11 p.m., I sat by the fireplace with a book. I was almost starting to relax when I heard something unusual, footsteps. They seemed to be coming from the porch, but they were light, as if something or someone was trying not to make a sound. I slowly got up, my heart racing, and looked through the window next to the door. There was nothing there, just darkness interrupted by the faint glow of the moon. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Maybe it was some animal, I told myself, though the explanation didn't fully convince me. I decided to secure the door lock before returning to the couch. That's when I noticed something strange. The fireplace, which I had lit not long ago, was now completely out, as if someone had blown it out. A shiver ran through my body. There was no way that could have happened naturally. Still, I forced myself to believe it was just a weird coincidence. I turned on the main lights and decided to go to the nearest bedroom to try to sleep. As I lay down, I noticed something I had ignored before, the absolute silence of the forest. There was no sound of birds, the creek, or even the wind. It was as if everything had stopped, leaving only the sound of my own heartbeat echoing in the room. As the silence became almost deafening, I began to notice a low, continuous sound, like deep breathing. It seemed to come from somewhere inside the room, but it wasn't mine. I held my breath for a moment, trying to locate the source. My eyes scanned the room, illuminated only by the faint light from the lamp. Nothing seemed out of place, but the feeling of being watched was impossible to ignore. I got up slowly, trying to make as little noise as possible, and walked toward the door of the room. The idea of leaving the cabin and facing the dark forest was terrifying, but staying there felt even worse. That's when I heard the creaking of wood, a sound coming from downstairs. As if someone, or something, was walking through the living room. My body froze. I knew I had locked the front door, and there was no way anyone could have entered without me hearing. The deep breathing I had heard earlier now seemed much closer. Summoning my courage, I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, pointing it toward the hallway. The flickering light revealed nothing, but each step I took heightened my sense of vulnerability. When I reached the stairs, I looked down. Nothing seemed out of place, but the creaking continued, as if someone was moving. The strangest part was that, as I heard the sounds, I saw no movement. It was as if the sound was misplaced. Suddenly, the kitchen light, which I had left on, went out by itself. In that instant, I heard a low, incomprehensible whisper. My throat tightened, and my hands began to shake. Something wasn't right, and the cabin, which had seemed so cozy during the day, was now oppressive and threatening. Heart pounding, I decided to go down the stairs, even though every fiber of my being screamed at me to do the opposite. The flashlight in my hand flickered, casting distorted shadows on the wooden walls. I reached the kitchen, where the silence was almost palpable. I looked around, trying to find some rational explanation. Maybe it was just a wiring problem, I thought, trying to convince myself. That's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the fogged-up window, there were marks, fingerprints. They started on the outside but ended inside the house, as if someone had passed their hand across the glass from the outside, entering. I swallowed hard and took a step back, stumbling slightly on a chair. The noise echoed through the house, and almost immediately, I heard a sound behind me. A soft click, like a door unlocking. I turned quickly, but there was no one there. The front door, however, was now ajar, letting the cold night air inside. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice trembling more than I'd like. There was no answer. Just the sound of the rain outside and the occasional creak of the wood. I decided I'd had enough. I grabbed my keys, my backpack, and ran toward the car. On the way, I looked back one last time. On the second floor of the cabin, behind the window of the room I had been in, a dark silhouette watched me. It didn't move, it just stayed there, motionless, as I ran away. I drove as fast as I could, not daring to look back. The sound of the rain hitting the windshield was constant, but my mind was stuck on the image of that silhouette. Who, or what, was that? When I finally reached the main road, a wave of relief washed over me, but the feeling of being watched didn't fade. I called the cabin's owner as soon as I had cell service. I reported what had happened, trying to stay calm. "That's impossible," he replied, a mix of disbelief and discomfort in his voice. "The house is isolated. No one should have been around." I didn't press the issue. I just wanted to leave the place behind. Later, I received a message from him. Maybe it was just the wind and the rain. The house has an old history, but nothing to worry about. Old history? Those words stayed with me. Days later, I decided to look up information about the cabin. I found reports from previous guests describing similar events, unexplained sounds, doors that opened by themselves, and the constant feeling of being watched. I never could explain what happened that night. Since then, I avoid renting isolated houses, especially those surrounded by forests. Sometimes, when I close my eyes to sleep, I still see that silhouette standing in the window, watching, motionless. If this story gave you the chills, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for more terrifying tales like this. And tell me, have you ever experienced something inexplicable? Share in the comments.